This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to coffee number 5. I'm really ready here with my coffee this morning, and I need the extra coffee. I just came back from New York, and somehow the jet lag really hit me this time. So I don't know my body doesn't know what time zone I am right now. So the extra caffeine is really helping. So also, I was thinking, because today I got my new driver license, and you have no say in how you look in those pictures. You absolutely have no say. And it could have been worse. Let's put it that way. It could have been much, much worse. But that kept me thinking the importance of how we photography things, how we look, because we are our own product sometimes, or our products look. So I've been reaching to this lady that I was connected, I don't know how, for a while, and we had this in the books for a long, long time, and then we had to reschedule, but finally she's here, Kimberly Espinel. Welcome to coffee number 5, Kimberly.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for today and for our conversation.
Yeah, well, we are aligned in so many ways. We are both aligned in helping entrepreneurs. We are not a competition. We are not doing the same. We actually complete each other. And I love what you do, because you're not only an incredible photographer, you help entrepreneurs to understand how important is to create this different steps or pieces of the ecosystem and put it together, but also you can contribute with them in the importance of imagery.
That's true,
so important. And I was talking, I actually had a live in Instagram, I think it was last week, with a photographer also. It was a product photographer. And people don't realize that when they launch a brand, to have a budget for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find out that that's an issue with photography, that everyone now can have a phone or a good camera? They think that their pictures are going to be good enough.
So, it's really interesting, because I know when the iPhone came to be and, quote unquote, everybody could be a photographer, just like everybody now can be a videographer. I think the very old school photographers did get a little bit nervous, but actually what I have noticed, and what I think is going to happen with videography too, is that it actually creates more demand. It actually creates more demand for really, really good photographers. And so what I have seen, and what I've seen also for my mentoring clients, is that as long as you're good and what you create is different and you have a unique look that stands out, that's noticeable, you will always find work, and there is more and more and more work to be had. So I actually have found the opposite, especially because I think restaurants and brands have actually noticed it takes a lot of time, and it also takes a lot of knowledge to make your photo look good. Yes, everyone can take a photo, but not everyone can do it and make it look beautiful.
People know here that my first degree is in production and direction of television. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I had to learn in school was to edit. Back then, we didn't have digital, so it had to be manual, which was a lot more challenging. I always was working with a couple guys that they were editors, and they were seeing things that my eye wasn't seeing it. And I was, oh my God, where do you see that? And I honestly wasn't seeing it. And after years of working and training, now I'm in the opposite side, and I can see things that people cannot see. So there is something to be said about the experience and the training. Because the photographer their eye is trained to see beyond what is there.
Yes. And also, to go back to your example of Fashion Week, because you just mentioned you were there, a lot of us, we can put something on and then know that it looks good, but we don't always know why. We don't understand why, whereas a designer or a fashion expert or something, they will see and they say it looks good because A, B, C, and D. And it's the same with photography. Like, a lot of people take photos and then they're like, I don't like it, but I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't know, what I don't understand. Or I've done it in a way I don't like, but I don't know how to fix it. So it is a very particular skill and it takes time and knowledge. And as you mentioned, lots of experience to get it just
And
right.
also because it's time consuming. I mean, we did a lot of learning and failing and learning again to get where we got today. But also is other kind of knowledge. Like, for example, if I'm working with a brand, I'm going to be looking at the competition. What is the competition doing? Because I don't want to do exactly the same that they are doing. I want to do something and see how I can do it better. So, and for what direction I go. And that's where my classes in psychology or marketing came handy, because I learned to think the psychological part, or even I had to take class of designs, or the psychology of colors, or the psychology of fonts. All that is, and for you, I'm sure the lighting, the spacing, all those things you need to keep in consideration.
Yes, composition is huge, colors, as you mentioned, but then also things like, bowls, ceramics, backdrops, and not just that, but it's also really expensive, to hire that, to buy it, to store it. So it's not just a quick thing of picking up your iPhone and taking a shot. There's a whole lot that goes on behind the scenes to make a beautiful shot happen.
I love to talk about the specifics, because a lot of people out there are trying to understand. Yeah, we're speaking about all these concepts about photography, and you specialize in restaurants and in food, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So how do you make a dish look amazing? Because sometimes I've seen all those videos that they are popular right now in TikTok, that how you use glue or food coloring to look at this, but also there are very expert photographers like you yourself that they are working with the real thing.
Absolutely. So I work mainly with restaurants and then in what we call editorial. So that's cookbooks, magazines, also content for people's website, that kind of thing. And in fact, the law here in the UK where I live is that for those kind of things, we're not actually allowed to use glue and food coloring, things like that, because it's considered misleading, really. Like you're showing something that isn't actually the truth. So, but also it is beautiful, I think, to work with the real thing and to challenge yourself and make it happen.
I know it is a challenge, because even let glue a hamburger is easy and everything will stay in place, or putting, there is a lot of things that you can do to enhance the image, like maybe put some drops of water.
Of course.
But they're natural things, not trying to make it stick there.
Yes, exactly. So to go back to your original question, I'd say there's a couple of things to really help with food styling and generally to make your food photo look really gorgeous. And one is lighting. So that could be natural light, it can be artificial light, but both of them, the lighting you use for food photography is very different than the lighting you use for fashion, for example, or for products, even as you mentioned. I think the second thing is really to think about colors in your food. So, like a piece of bread, like just a piece of bread is not going to look as nice as, say, a piece of bread with some peanut butter and then maybe some banana and a drizzle of maple syrup. It's going to look very different. So there has to be some colors, some texture as well. Those are really essential elements in helping, the food styling look next level. And then the truth is that I started out as a prop stylist and then became a food stylist. Now I'm mainly a food photographer. And so what I do now is I work with food stylists, so professionals who really allow me to stay behind the camera and direct and compose and play with light and all those things, and they go and style. And so that's what makes.
Let me clarify this. So when you work with a food stylist, how does it work? You first have a meeting and you have an inspiration of what's your vision for those pictures, or is it stylist vision?
No. So as a photographer, you're really in charge. You have the kind of bigger picture overview. You decide where things go, but you do have a meeting usually with the client to see what their vision is, what they want. Often I ask the client to put a mood board together to give us a kind of rough sense of the images they have in their head, where they want their brand, their restaurant, their cookbook, whatever, the the creative direction of that. And then I put my head together with a food stylist and we come up with a shoot list and a plan. And we discuss, things like, if we're making a cake, for example, like an apple pie or something like that, like how should the food stylist slice the apples? Are we going to create little cubes? Are we going to make little, like very, very thin? So all those kind of things we talk about in advance and set that in advance. And then we kind of take it from there. But as a photographer, you always have the last say, and it also is your responsibility for everything to turn out perfectly. So yeah, you kind of direct the food stylist but ideally you're working with really experienced people, really, really good people. You choose your team and they make your work super easy.
What about location?
So I have a home studio, but if not here where I live in London, there's a lot of studios. Sometimes also we shoot in the restaurant or cafe. And what I always advise is if that's something you're going to do, then check the lighting situation. So are you going to use natural light? Either visit, that's probably your best bet, just to check and see how it goes. Or do you need to bring your artificial lights? And is there space for it? Is there big enough space? Are there going to be customers walking around? That kind of thing. Maybe check out the menu in advance, have a shoot list. So those are some of the things that will definitely help when you shoot on location.
Yeah, so it's so important that people out there understand that when you hire a photographer, it's so much more beyond the moment of taking a picture. What they are getting all the planning ahead. And so it's really important, the communication with your photographer, and that you explain, this is what I want, this is my goal, and this is how the images will be used for. Because it's very different for a photographer to work for a menu or for editorial that for pictures for social.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, that's something, really interesting that you mentioned usage, right? So that's something you always have to discuss in advance. So is it something, as you mentioned, for digital use and, or is this something that's going to be used for an ad, be it a Facebook ad, a Pinterest ad, or whatever, an ad on TikTok or in a magazine? So all of those things bring with it also a different budget. And then the other thing that a lot of people don't think about is, somebody has to buy the food. Somebody has to wash the dishes.
Of course.
Somebody has to pay the bills for the water that was used to wash the dishes and that kind of thing. Props break, backdrops scratch. So there's a lot of, finances behind the scenes.
So you always you have an assistant working with you, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, usually the food stylist is my assistant. Sometimes I also have an assistant on top of that. It kind of depends how big the project is.
Okay, so let's say that someone is starting their own restaurant. What would you recommend? What is a must list, the must photography list for a new business?
So what I would advise, it kind of depends. So it's a little bit tricky because generally speaking, I wouldn't advise a restaurant to have, to also do their own photography. I would advise them to hire a photographer to do that for them. Now, of course, it depends a little bit on the size of the restaurant, their budget.
Let's say like, for example, if they ask me as a marketing agency, I will say, absolutely put in your budget a photographer, because you need good pictures of your menu for people to see and buy it. Also for your website, you will need all that. If you are sure your budget is small, then I would say, well, you know what, social, maybe you can do it with your own photos, but good pictures for your website are a must. And I will strongly recommend to use a photographer.
Yes. And also, as we mentioned before, I think even if your budget is small, sometimes we say this in Spanish, lo barato sale caro. So something that seems really cheap and like a way of saving money, actually, in the end, it costs you dearly. And so I think if you don't hire a photographer, or if you don't hire a social media manager, and that's really where a lot of businesses now have to move towards, and you decide to do that in-house, aka whatever the chef or whatever, that means you're pulling that person away from what they need to do
Yeah.
To
Well,
create that
this is what I always
content.
say. You need to find how much your time is worth. Because if you're
Exactly.
gonna have to spend 2 days taking pictures until you get some decent pictures, and you bought all these kind of props, you had to buy new lighting for do it. You have to have an assistant to do it. Those days you weren't running your business.
Exactly. 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 And I mean, I have to say, I do feel for restaurants that are just starting up, startups. It is really tough. It is tough to make your mark. The restaurant industry is very hard. I think something like 60% of restaurants close within the first 5 years
But
of opening.
also that could be one of the reasons a lot of restaurants are failing, because they're not marketing them right. They think that that's opening the door. I always say it's the same like selling a house. If you put a house, but you don't photograph it right, you don't get the good images, and then you don't put it in the market to sell it, nobody's going to see it.
Yes. I mean, I recently heard somebody say, I don't know who it was, so I cannot quote correctly, but, there's this saying, build it and they shall come. And then I recently heard someone say, but that's not true.
That's
it
not
is
true.
No longer true.
It's not at the field of
it's
your
not
dream.
True. It's not like that anymore. And I think a lot of businesses, especially creative businesses, that's what I know and that's what I understand.
Yes.
And I consider a food business a creative business. They really think that because they want it and they dream it and their food is amazing, that it will happen and everybody will come and there will be queues down the road, around the corner. And it is not like that anymore, because there's so much and there's so much for people to choose from. But B, if you don't have a marketing strategy, it is very, very hard to make ends meet. And
Absolutely.
I also think a lot of people are like, I know how to cook, or I know how to photograph, or I know how to, build a house, but I don't know how to sell. And actually, maybe you don't know, but you either need to learn how to do it or you need to hire somebody who does, because it's a fundamental part to making your business work.
Absolutely. And it's really important that you have a team behind you if you're launching a business. I understand what is to be a solo entrepreneur, because I am, but I have a huge team behind me. I'm not doing it all. I wouldn't be able to meet with clients or even doing this podcast if I would have a team working behind me and making things happening.
That's so true. Yes.
And it's really important that you understand, you get in the mindset of the business owner, how important it is to network. Even if you have a restaurant or marketing agency, you never know what connections you're going to make. And those connections are the kind of can break it or make it. That if you meet someone important, that they come to a restaurant and like it and recommends it, or that you get an event to happen in your restaurant. You never know, but as a business owner, it's really important to put yourself out there.
Absolutely, 100%. And I love that you said networking. I think it's, especially after COVID, for many of us, we've kind of, gone very inward and, not put our feelers out, not gotten out into the world. And I think
tell that to my feet. After this week walking in New York on hills, I haven't done it so long that I think my shoes thought that I was there.
Exactly. So I think a lot of people still are stuck in that insular bubble. But actually networking and connecting with people within your industry is really important, and, supporting one another. And as you said in the beginning of this podcast, we're not competition. We're just, working together in the space, serving different clients in different ways.
Like I know other people have agencies, and I only work with certain clients right now, and I only have a capacity of clients. It's the same like you are as a photographer and you booked. So I'm happy to refer other people when they are certain fit. I work with certain kind of websites only. I don't work with other CMSs. So I'm happy to refer to someone else. But I think our goal as professionals always is, if we want anyone who comes to us because they respect our work, to end up with someone that is respectful and they know what they're doing, and not that person who was trusting us end up having a bad experience for finding someone who is not as professional.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm.
So before we go, I want to ask you a question because I love to hear personal stories about what tell us that story of something that went completely wrong. That photo shoot that was completely wrong, but because it was completely wrong, you were able to pull it off and it was amazing.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I don't know if I have that as a story per se. I guess which is a little bit different, but I hope it still hits the mark, so to say.
Okay.
I really had this huge, it was like honestly, one day I woke up, I was like, I want to write a book. I know I need to write a book. This is a book about food photography. I have to bring out into the world. Like I know that I'm going to get a publisher and it's going to be amazing and everyone's going to buy it. And so I wrote an amazing proposal. And I did it like I recorded everything for my podcast. I have a podcast too called Eat, Capture, Share. And I recorded it like every step along the way. And I was like, we're going to hear how I pitch it and how I'm going to get my book deal and how the book's going to go on to be a bestseller. And, I live happily ever after. And so I recorded everything, every step along the way. And I submitted my proposal and I got rejected. And I submitted it again and I got rejected again. And in total, I got rejected 32 times. Mm-hmm. And everything was live on the podcast and I never got my book deal. And so that was not like what I had envisaged. But I knew deep down that I really wanted to bring this book to life. And in the middle of the pandemic, I shot it and I self-published it as well. And it did go on to become a bestseller. And I did make that happen. But it wasn't what I envisaged. It wasn't what I dreamed of. And it was very vulnerable to share, that failure live, so to say. But yeah, I think all things happen for a reason. And
absolutely.
It completely changed everything for me. And it just went exactly the way it needed to. I just didn't know it at the time.
You just need to be open-minded and take the opportunities, learn, and the failures too, learn from them and keep going. I mean,
Yes.
One failure is not gonna label you as a failure as one win is not labeling you as a winner either.
No, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Kimberly, for being here today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure you guys out there learn a lot about how to get your images right for your business. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Lara. Thanks for having me.
And to you guys, I see you next week with more Coffee Number 5. It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.